Hey guys, welcome back to Nerd Array. Today we are doing video 2, which is going to be why the PC. So, kind of exciting. It's kind of an important topic. We cover why the PC actually came around. So, just as a little bit of a backstory, we're going to talk a little bit about, what made the PC so successful, why it's still around today, why we have standards in PC hardware, and other stuff like that. So, first off, we have to understand where the PC came from and what the PC does. So the PC stands for personal computer. So the difference between personal computer and just a computer is that a personal computer is meant to be used by an individual. So the idea with a PC is it's meant to be used by, say, a student, or if it's not a student, or a business person, or something like that. I can't spell today. There's no other S in there. A business person. The idea with the PC is it's meant to be used by individuals. And this is important because a long time ago, when they used to have computers, they used to be on mainframes and really big, clunky computers. So mainframes are these kind of big, chunky servers that used to run in rooms. So they would take up whole rooms worth of space, and they were very fast at the time in the 1960s, 1970s, but they required many different people to work on them. It would not be a one-person operation. So if you wanted to do something small, you couldn't really do it. And not to mention, it wasn't portable at all. So you had to have a whole host of people to work on this server, this mainframe. And so these large computers kind of went out of style because the individual could not use it. So the PC was a fundamental difference from those types of computers. So the PC is meant to be small enough for a home or an office. And that's important because it brings the it brings the performance of a PC, performance of a computer, into everyone's grasp. So the biggest difference to everyone's hands. So back in the day, they had big computers such as, like, say, ENAC. It was a phenomenal PC, computer piece of hardware. But the thing was, this was a multi-module and room, I guess, multi-room computer. And the problem with big computers like this is obviously you can't take them with you. They're not portable. There's nothing you can do with this outside of where they sit, and you're not moving this anytime soon. And the reason that these computers were so big is due to something. I'm going to draw a little line here. Wow, that's bad. Called the vacuum tube. So something fundamental you're going to need to understand about computers is that they used to use these things called vacuum tubes. And now vacuum tubes are a bit of a pain. Let's get a new slide here so I can show you. So vacuum tubes are little tiny, not tiny, I guess they're almost like a light bulb. They kind of look like them if you've ever seen them. I can't draw, so pardon the horrible drawings here. They kind of look something along these lines. And they would have, they're usually silver coated or something. But these vacuum tubes have wires that go into them. And what these do is these act as switches. So these are electronic switches. And so I'm going to draw just kind of an example of what this actually does. Like a light switch. When you have it, it can be either on or off. And this is kind of how computers do their work. It's either on or it's off. And if you have this switching on or off, it outputs an on, which is a 1, or off, which is a 0 in voltage. So say this puts out a voltage when it's on. This is a 1. If it's off, it's 0. And so the string of ones and zeros that these vacuum tubes and other electronic components use for their logic, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, is called binary. So unlike a lot of things in our world, computers operate in black or white, literally black or white, 1 or 0. And this is called, yes, binary. So binary is how computers do everything they do. They need these strings of ones and zeros to make sense to them because it's kind of the instructions that shape how the computer works. And so this is why computers were so big. These parts that did the switching, the vacuum tubes, had to be so large. Also, they were also very unreliable, so they failed a lot. They required a lot of people to go in and change these quite often. So that's one of the problems with these vacuum tubes. And so after a while, the vacuum tubes kind of became out of date, so people didn't want these anymore. They were too big, they were too bulky, they took a lot of power. So then we started with something small called the transistor. And this is just an example of one that you'd maybe find on the breadboard or something. And these are also act like switches. So the transistor was a huge improvement in the technology. Transistors can be made extremely small. These are made out of stuff like silicon and different semiconductors. And these are small and they're fast. And they can do a lot more than this can for the same amount of space. So, and they also take less power, which is extremely important. So, again, bringing the power of the vacuum tube into the home has never been really possible until now, when we have controllers and not microcontrollers, microprocessors, which I'll talk a little bit about that again in my next video, based on this transistor. So the transistor shrunk everything, and so these do the same job. It's just smaller and it doesn't move. Nothing in here takes a high voltage or anything like that. So that's why the transistor became such a big deal in the move to PCs. And so, of course, with the PC, we have the internet, and we have many different things that we use based on that. And because all of this runs, believe it or not, on a lot of PC hardware. And a lot of that PC hardware is actually because of that transistor. There's not hardly any vacuum tubes in use probably in the computing marketplace anymore, unless it's just for novelty slash historical value. So as the transistors get smaller, they can transistor size, I guess I'm going to say, as transistor size goes down, the power used goes down. And as the power used goes down, that means we can fit more into the same computer. So that means performance goes up. And we'll talk a bit about this. Performance goes up. So that's why, even though we have transistors and stuff, as new generations of computers come out, they get faster and faster, because as they shrink in size and there are different optimizations, people have done stuff to make these better and them all work together better. They use less power, and yes, the performance increases. So that's why PCs have been notorious for fast turnaround. And it's even, I think it's called, what is it? I'm trying to remember the name. Oh gosh, I gotta get it. It's, I think it's called Moore's Law. Not sure if it's how it's spelled. Moores. I believe this is it. Moore's Law. Let's go with that, okay? Which says that transistor size shrinks. It's not exact. So there's more to it than that, but let's just go with that. So transistor size shrinks, and there's a big reason for that. Like we said, power used and performance and size. Everything like that is more important. So these little switches work together in a coordinated effort to do stuff. So these switches are not just switches are kind of smart, actually. I'm going to say are smart. And they're really quite dumb. This is why we have smart TVs, because it has a CPU and stuff. We're going to get into that, but that's basically the heart of it. But they're smart. So that's why we use transistors in our modern computers. So now I've talked a little bit about what transistors are, vacuum tubes, and how they all kind of work together. We need to talk a little bit about the history. So the IBM, IBM was a big player back in the day. They've kind of have shrunk down a lot. But IBM released the PC all the way back, and I think it's 1970 something. I think 78, I want to say. I'm not sure if it was 1978, but it was a long time ago. And the PC has taken off ever since. What the PC, the IBM PC, and this is where we get all of our terminology from, what it did differently than a lot of other attempts at computers at the time was it was affordable and it was fast. And what it claimed to do is it claimed to replace mainframes and stuff from years past and allowed different users to use it individually inside of corporations and such. So this was a really big deal. And it was kind of the first commercial or business computer. So it was a business hit, big time. So once the IBM PC took off in, I think it was 1978, I'm not sure on that number, but it was, for these reasons, it kind of took off, and that spurred a whole new era of development. After the IBM PC, we had the PS2, which actually I have one. I should probably do a video on that at some point. But it was another great computer, and it really started bringing PCs into the home and into the workplace in droves. So it kind of piggybacked on the success of the PC, and it really kind of brought in a new wave of PCs to the market. So after the PS2, we had all sorts of clones and copies, and this is kind of where we start off with different other stuff. So we had clones of this PC, I think, and copies, or I'm not sure if it was PC or not, or was the PS2, but we had all sorts of clones and copies, and this is really where a lot of companies started out of, and this is why the PC is so widespread, because this was so big that everybody else wanted to copy it. So after we have all these clones and copies, we also have something else that's kind of important to touch on. Even if you like them or not, you have to acknowledge them, and that's Apple. So Apple, wow, spelling on point. So Apple was, of course, founded by Steve Jobs and I think it was Steve Wozniak, I believe is his name. And it really came about, and they revolutionized the PC in different ways. Also revolutionary. So the difference between Apple and the PC IBM is that they tried totally different markets, and they had totally different philosophies for building these machines. So Apple focused on bringing the PC to everyone. So it was to everyone. That was kids, that was anybody who didn't know anything about computers. This is to make a computer system that was fun and easy to use. And IBM was big on, I'm going to actually draw a line here. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. IBM was very big on the whole business side of things. So they weren't so concerned about how easy it was to use. So these were very hard to use. And they were often kind of took some time to learn. So learning curve is a big deal. So again, this is kind of interesting because this is similar to how PCs and Apple is kind of today. And then these kind of core ideas are that Apple is easy and it's simple. And the problem with easy and simple is that it's also not easy to use the more core functionality. Not easy to use for complex stuff. So the difference in philosophies between IBM and the different PC manufacturers has been quite different. So IBM often went for raw power, and a lot of other PCs go for raw power. And the Mac brand and Apple in general, if you look at a lot of their products, they go for beauty. And that's a fundamental difference between these two companies. So that is really the difference between Apple and IBM and the PCs at the time in the 1970s and 80s and 90s and really even nowadays. So that's kind of a good explanation, I think, of that. Good summary. So really the PC, what you need to take away from this is that the PC was a game changer. And really it changed the way that the world worked. It was kind of a difference between, getting stuff done slowly, by hand. So it really brought a lot of those people quite in the workplace and such. It gave them a lot more work. And unfortunately, kind of in a way, if you want to think of it, it meant more work. Because you were expected to know how to use these new computers. And if you didn't know, you'd have to learn. So it meant more work for these people because businesses assumed they could do more. But it also meant you could get more done. So that was why it was important for businesses. And for individuals, it meant that there were the seeds of gaming and different stuff like that, like YouTube, like what you're watching right now, gaming and entertainment. So that was a big difference between the PC and what has come before it. It was kind of the seed that really has started our 21st century, if you want to think of it. So that's kind of a good overview. The biggest takeaway I would say for this video was that the PC was different. The PC was different. And the reason I say that the PC was different is that it opened doors that no other technology had. So open doors. Now, we can discuss if it's good or bad day, but that's the biggest takeaway. It opened doors. Hope you guys found that interesting. Let's get into our next video. CPUs for everybody. Wow, that was a horrible title. Let's not call it CPUs for everybody. Let's call it something else, but you know what I mean. Anyways, see you guys.